So good evening again, everyone, and welcome. We're so excited to have you here with us tonight. I am Anka Badurina, and I am the Executive Director of Building One Community. It is my pleasure to present this evening's program to you, dedicated to provide information for Venezuelans who are interested in applying for temporary protection status, or commonly known as TPS. Hola, buenas noches a todos y bienvenidos. Mi nombre es Anka Badurina y soy la directora de Building One Community. Es un placer estar aquí con ustedes y presentar la charla de esta noche, dedicadas a proveer información crucial para los venezolanos interesados en aplicar al proceso de protección temporal o TPS, como se conoce por sus siglas en inglés. This webinar and the consultations that will follow in a few weeks are the result of the collaboration between members of the Lower Fairfield County Immigration Collaborative, some of us here tonight, and the American Immigration Lawyers Association, the chapter in Connecticut. Collectively, these attorneys and their nonprofit organizations or private law firms are committed to provide immigrants the best possible counsel on immigration issues and educating everyone, immigrant and non-immigrant alike, on immigration issues that are important for the future of the United States. So, esta presentación y las consultas que tendremos con los abogados en una semana son el resultado de la colaboración entre los miembros del colaborativo de inmigración del Bajo Fairfield County y la Asociación Americana de Abogados de Inmigración en su capítulo de Connecticut. Colectivamente, estos abogados y nuestras organizaciones y los bufetes estamos dedicados a proveer a nuestra comunidad inmigrante el mejor consejo posible en cuestiones de inmigración. Asimismo, nuestro empeño está en educar a la comunidad inmigrante y nativos también en asuntos de inmigración que son importantes para el futuro de los Estados Unidos. El tema de hoy en particular me toca a mí una fibra muy personal como venezolana que soy. Mi acento no sé qué dice, pero yo nací en Venezuela. Deseo sinceramente que esta presentación pueda ayudar a mis compatriotas a encontrar una salida legal para su estancia en este país. So just a few housekeeping notes before we get started. And you can see here in the screen that please know that we will be recording this session to make it available to other people who could not attend today. However, no information about the persons who are in attendance will be made public. Your privacy is protected. We're very happy to be able to offer simultaneous interpretation tonight. You can listen either in English or with simultaneous interpretation into Spanish. Estamos muy contentos de poder ofrecer traducción simultánea, así que usted puede escuchar esta charla en inglés o con traducción simultánea al español. Ahora, para escuchar el audio en español, haga clic, y en la pantalla lo puede ver, haga clic en el icono del globo en la barra de control que tiene la etiqueta Interpretation o interpretación y seleccione Spanish. Después seleccione Mute Original Audio, Mute Original Audio. Les voy a dar unos segunditos para que hagan esto. Si está participando a través de un smartphone o tableta, hay un paso extra. Primero tiene que hacer clic en el icono con los 3 puntitos, el que dice arriba More o More. Con este llegará a la pantalla con las opciones de idioma. Por favor, haga clic en el idioma ahora. Y si tiene alguna pregunta, háganoslo saber a través del Q&A, donde dice Q y A. Por favor, escriba, haga clic ahí, escriba su pregunta o comentario en el cuadro y pulse Send. Y la pregunta nos llegará y ahí podremos ayudarles. Así que a partir de estos momentos será en inglés y vamos a comenzar la traducción ahora. After the speakers have made their brief initial remarks, we will open up the discussion for your questions. So that Q&A section is important. In order, again, to ask a question, please click on the Q&A icon and write your question in the box. Please write your questions in English or Spanish. We will only answer the questions submitted by the Q&A. We're not using the chat feature or raise hand. So please always go to the Q&A and post your questions there. As we all know, since his first days in office, President Biden has offered an entirely new set of priorities that are much more immigrant friendly. One of his most important actions today was to grant TPS status to eligible Venezuelan nationals currently in the United States. I'm gonna go slower, so we have our interpreter, we give her a bit of a chance. Under the Biden administration's policy, an estimated of around 200,000 people could actually apply to legally live in the United States for at least 18 months. This is the topic of tonight's event. So this presentation is directed to all the Venezuelans here. Our goal is to support you as you move forward with your TPS application. We want you to understand the eligibility criteria, to know the benefits and limitations of TPS, as you can see on the screen, to learn how to apply and what information is required, and finally, to identify what is called the yellow card or the red card issues that you should be alert to. We're also here to provide you with an opportunity to an optional free consultation on May 22nd, if it's appropriate for your circumstances. And finally, to guide you to find a qualified immigration attorney if needed. So our three speakers are experienced immigration attorneys, very well versed in this topic. I am thrilled to introduce you to Alicia Kinsman, if you can say hi, Alicia, to Megan LaFontaine, and to Adriana Podesta. Alicia Kinsman is Senior Staff Attorney and Technical Advisor at the Connecticut Institute for Refugees and Immigrants, or CIRI, very long-term partners of B1C. As the name indicates or implies, CIRI is the main organization in Connecticut for assisting refugees and asylees, and also offers the full range of other family-based immigration services. Alicia also has her own firm, ARK Immigration, in Bridgeport. She has a JD from Quinnipiac University School of Law. So welcome, Alicia. It's always a pleasure to have you here with us.
Thank you so much.
And Megan LaFontaine is Chair of American Immigration Lawyers Association, or also known as AILA. Connecticut Chapter. AILA is the premier organization for immigration lawyers in the United States and committed to the highest standard of practice. She has built her own firm based in Middletown, Connecticut, and she focuses on some of the most challenging areas of immigration law, including asylum and removal defense. She's also very engaged in international adoptions. Megan also has a JD from the University of Connecticut School of Law. And welcome again, Megan. You are now one of our key speakers. So happy to have you here again.
Thank you. It's really nice to be back.
And Adriana Podesta is our Immigration Legal Services at Building One Community. Welcome, Adriana. Adriana has built B1C's Immigration Legal Services into one of the largest in Fairfield County. ILS, as we call our Immigration Legal Services, focuses principally on family-based immigration with the USCIS and humanitarian forms of relief, including TPS, DACA, asylum, PAWA, and EU visas. Adriana has a JD from Pace University Law School. So welcome as well, Adriana.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
And myself, I will be happily moderate tonight's conversation. So Alicia, Megan, and Adriana will be dividing the discussion of the TPS tonight. And I think it's Adriana who will start. So the floor is yours, Adriana.
Yes, hello everybody and welcome. We hope that this presentation is clear and helpful to you. And we are going to be presenting alternatively all these slides, and then you have a chance to ask questions. So what is temporary protected status? as the phrase says, it is a temporary protection from deportation. So it is something that the Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security decides from time to time to grant to the nationals of a specific country because of various emergency reasons, basically or traditionally ongoing armed conflict, environmental disaster like hurricanes, earthquakes, and other extraordinary and temporary conditions. In the case of Venezuela, it was cited as severe humanitarian emergency. So Venezuela was designated as a country to be granted temporary protective status on March 8th, 2021, effective March 9th, 2021. And the benefits are numerous. It's not only that the government will not deport anybody that is a national of Venezuela until September 9th of 2022, but the government will also grant them work authorization and travel authorization by requesting advance parole. It also stops the clock for those who are or have or planning or qualify for asylum. There's normally a 1-year deadline to apply, but the clock is stopped by virtue of holding the TPS status. The only thing that TPS doesn't do is grant permanent residence. So that's.
Sorry, I was unmuting myself. All right, so one of the things that TPS does do, though, even though it doesn't give permanent residence, is that it does make someone eligible for employment authorization. A TPS applicant has to file a separate application, so it's not automatically given with TPS. You do have to pay a separate application and a separate filing fee. And you file that application, and if granted, you get work authorization through September 9th of 2022. Sometimes the work permits are issued quickly, sometimes they're issued slowly. It all depends, just like with anything with immigration. It is not something that is guaranteed to be immediate, but it certainly could be useful for applicants down the road. Once someone gets a work authorization, an employment authorization document, that person is also eligible for a social security number. Typically, the social security numbers are issued simultaneously or within a couple of weeks of the work permits and are mailed directly to the applicant. The social security number itself never expires. The social security card, however, will indicate that it is valid only with work authorization, which means that if down the road you become a permanent resident or a US citizen, you will need to get that social security card amended to reflect your new status and the fact that work is given based on your status and doesn't require a separate document.
I'm going to remind ourselves that we have to speak a bit slower to give time to Juanita, our interpreter, to do her job. Thank you. Alicia, I will let you.
Okay, thank you. So what are the requirements for TPS? Who is eligible for temporary protected status from Venezuela? Well, the basic requirements are here. First and foremost, you have to be a national of Venezuela, though some individuals who have no nationality, who are stateless, and who last habitually resided in the country of Venezuela may also be eligible for TPS. In addition to Venezuelan nationality, the applicant will have had to have arrived in the United States on or before the designation date, which is March 8th of this year, and needs to have maintained continuous residence from at least March 8th and continuous physical presence from at least March 9th. So if you arrived here before March 8th and you've stayed here, you likely will meet that requirement. In addition, the TPS applicant has to be admissible. Admissible is the immigration word for eligible. So there are certain things that may make you ineligible, which we'll talk about in a bit. And finally, it's important to know that each TPS applicant must apply on their own. So if you are a family, a mom, dad, small children, you may all be eligible for TPS, but each person has to submit their own application.
Yes, so yellow cards. What situations would warrant a deeper look, a second look, or maybe a consultation with the professional? If you were ever arrested or detained by any immigration or police officer, or were convicted for any kind of offense, is worth taking a look, because that could make you inadmissible. And what's more, it could put you at risk of real deportation, and TPS may not be able to protect you. Holding more than one passport, that's a tricky one, because it does not, while having a second nationality does not exclude you from TPS, it may. Depending what immigration is going to look at is what is your operative nationality? What is your functional nationality? Where were you living before coming to the United States? Which passport did you use to enter the United States? And more likely than not, no matter whether you really are a Venezuelan or functionally you are not, you may receive what they call a request for further evidence or for initial evidence, and you will be asked to show more evidence that Venezuela is your operative country and you did not firmly resettled into a third country. So that is worth a careful look. And that's again past. If you pass through a third country after leaving Venezuela, it will depend how long you stay in that country. If you were working in that country, if you were offered residency or citizenship in that country. And also if you traveled outside the US after March 8th of 2021, that could make you not capable of getting TPS. And if you are inadmissible, meaning that if you committed visa fraud, any crimes, alien smuggling, and the whole array of things that can make you inadmissible to the US.
Then there are certain things that make you 100% ineligible for TPS. The first thing is that you are not a national of Venezuela. So, for example, if you are Colombian and residing in Venezuela, but not a national, not a citizen of Venezuela, then you're not eligible for TPS for Venezuelans. Additionally, if you have firmly resettled in a third country, so in other words, it's as though your residence is someplace other than Venezuela, then, and you were allowed to live in that third place legally, so somewhere other than Venezuela, somewhere other than the US, then you are not eligible for TPS. If you have been convicted of a felony or more than one misdemeanor, you are not eligible for TPS. If you fail to meet the continuous residence and continuous physical presence requirements, so those requirements about the date of entry into the country and how long you've been here, then you are not eligible. If you are subject to any other inadmissibility grounds that do not allow for a waiver, you are not eligible for TPS. So inadmissibility grounds are a number of grounds in the immigration law that make someone ineligible for an immigration benefit. Those grounds can range from certain types of crimes, criminal convictions, certain types of criminal activity, even absent a criminal conviction, to immigration fraud, to claiming to be a US citizen, to all sorts of things, filing certain types of applications with fraudulent information. Those are all different things that may make someone inadmissible. There are also medical reasons that someone may be inadmissible, mental health reasons that could make someone inadmissible. Many of these reasons have or are allowed, someone who has these reasons is allowed to file a waiver, which is an application for forgiveness for these inadmissibility grounds. But some of these grounds do not allow for that waiver. If you are subject to a ground that does not allow for a waiver, you are not eligible for TPS. There are also things that are bars to asylum. Asylum is a different type of relief. It's for someone who fears persecution or has been persecuted in their home country. There are certain bars preventing someone from getting asylum. If you're subject to those, then you would also be barred from getting TPS.
So before we keep going, I'd like to remind the audience of how to ask questions. I see that some of you are already asking questions, but just as a quick reminder for everyone, remember that you can use the Q&A, the Q&A box, as we will take in your questions later on. We saw your questions. Please keep coming, and we will answer them at the end. Feel free to write your questions either in Spanish or English. And again, we're not using the chat or the raise hand feature. Alicia, could you please continue?
So another recent announcement for immigration alongside of TPS extended for Venezuelan nationals was the extension of deferred enforced departure, or DED, for Venezuelan nationals as well. DED is another form of administrative immigration relief. In some ways, it's similar to TPS because it will temporarily stop the removal of an individual who is a qualifying national of Venezuela. But there are some key differences. For deferred enforced departure, there's no prior registration needed. It will automatically come into play. It can automatically stop a removal for certain Venezuelan nationals. For DED, there also comes eligibility for a work permit. An individual can apply for work authorization on the basis of eligibility for DED. And in addition, there are some bars to TPS that don't exist for DED. So there may be some individuals who are Venezuelan nationals who cannot get TPS, but still may be able to obtain protection through DED as well as a work permit. For most individuals, if you're eligible for TPS, that is likely to be the better option for you. But for some individuals, DED may be the only option. It's likely that you would have to consult with an attorney to see what would work best for you if you are trying to compare the two.
So are there any reasons not to apply for TPS? As Megan went over the red flags, if your case fits in there, you should not apply for TPS because the consequences could be serious. It will be denied. The application will be denied, obviously. And the risk is of having a notice to appear, what is known as the NTA, could be issued to this foreign national. And what that is the equivalent of a charging document that will put this person in proceedings in immigration court, where the government will seek to deport this person. The likelihood of this happening is hard to fathom, but it's better to avoid filing if the case is clearly going to be denied.
Now, many individuals who are from Venezuela may be eligible for both TPS and asylum. As I said, asylum is a type of relief for individuals who have been persecuted or who fear persecution in their home country, in this case, Venezuela, because of one of 5 different grounds. If you are eligible for both TPS and asylum, you certainly would, it's certainly advisable for you to talk to an attorney about the benefits of applying for both and the timing of when you should file for one or the other, or if they should be filed simultaneously. Asylum is a form of relief that may allow for you to become a permanent resident down the road and to become a US citizen down the road. It doesn't happen in every case, but certainly many individuals who apply for asylum and become asylees do get that benefit. Even if you are not eligible for permanent residence or citizenship, you may be eligible to remain an asylee for the rest of your life, as opposed to remaining a TPS recipient for a limited amount of time, based on however long the government chooses to continue to designate Venezuela as a TPS country. Some additional things to consider are, in terms of when to file and how to file, would be something you really need to discuss with an attorney. If you're in removal proceedings, it may change certain elements of either case. If you haven't filed for asylum yet, or if you have filed, when and how to file for TPS is something you want to consider to discuss with an attorney as well.
Okay, so now we've discussed all of the requirements for TPS and how it works, and this is how you apply. So there are required forms to be able to register for temporary protected status. You'll find these forms at the Immigration Services website, which is uscis.gov, and certainly you can get there directly by doing the /TPS. The forms required are going to be the first and foremost, the I-821, which is the application for temporary protected status. It's a multi-page form that requests lots of biographic information, lots of historical information, and information about your history to try to ensure that the applicant is not inadmissible, which is, as we've said a few times now, the immigration word for ineligible, that none of those things that immigration thinks is particularly bad has occurred in your past history. In addition, if the applicant for TPS is also seeking an employment authorization document or a work permit, he or she will also have to fill out and submit an I-765, which is an application for work authorization. Both forms are free and downloadable from Immigration's website. Both forms have instructions available on the website as well. In addition to properly filling out the forms and filing them with the appropriate filing fee, the request for TPS for initial TPS must be submitted to USCIS before September 5th of this year. So that's a really important deadline because applications that are submitted after the deadline will be rejected and denied for being untimely. And unless the government redesignates Venezuela in the future, it will prevent individuals from applying for the first time again. So if you are a Venezuelan national and eligible for TPS, barring very limited exceptions, you must apply by September 5th of this year.
And the forms don't need to be accompanied by documents. So the basic elements are being a Venezuelan national and the physical presence and continuous residence. So to prove the Venezuelan nationality, you need a copy of the birth certificate, passport, national ID, anything else that will show, depending on what you can obtain, could be, if you don't have any of these, could be baptism certificate, but the classical is a passport and a birth certificate. And to prove the continuous presence, the physical presence and the continuous presence and the physical presence from March 8th, you need, if you came before that time, you may have the stamp in the passport, the I-94 arrival record that you can find online, or if you did not come with a passport, with a visa, through the, you came through the border, then you need other type of documents like the employment records or rent receipts, utility bills, any school records, anything that shows that you left footprints in this country. Yeah, you also need 2 passport photos.
When you include the filing fees for the TPS application and the work permit, together, the application fee total is $545 per person. Again, please remember that everyone has to file this application individually. It is not something that is done per household or per family. If, however, you do have a child under 14, there is a reduction in the application fee. If there's someone who is 66 or older, there's also a reduction in the application fee. Those fees are noted here, but just make sure of who you're filing for and how many applications you need to ensure that you have the appropriate filing fees included with your submission. Where you send that submission depends on how you're sending it. There are instructions on the USCIS page for Venezuela TPS applications that give you options to send by USPS via Postal Service or via FedEx or UPS.
Okay, so the forms are available online. The fees are stated at USCIS's website. The instructions are there. Is applying for TPS something that you should do on your own, or should you be working with an attorney? Well, like with many other things, the answer to that question is it depends. There are some scenarios in which applying for TPS on your own may be an okay thing to do. If you are an individual who is clearly eligible for TPS, someone who meets all of the requirements, period, full stop, with no complicating factors. You don't have a dual nationality, you've never resided in any other country, you came to the US prior to the designated date and can easily prove it, and you have no criminal history and no other negative factors in your immigration history, then it's possible that you may be a good candidate to file on your own. But you may consider having a consultation with a legal professional, with an attorney or a DOJ accredited legal representative, just to go through everything. This is where signing up for a free consultation is going to be a great fit. You will be receiving information about how to sign up for a free consultation to discuss your eligibility. If you aren't able to participate or it makes more sense for you to go elsewhere, just make sure that the advice that you're getting is coming from someone who can legally give it to you. To make sure that if you're seeking advice and assistance from an attorney or a legal representative, that it really is someone who is a licensed attorney, and you can find that out online. Every attorney is going to be have their bar admission information, their license information available online. And in addition, AILA, the American Immigration Lawyers Association, has a great tool that's the link is here on the slide for you to be able to search and identify qualified and experienced immigration attorneys in your area. This also is going to be really important for individuals who do have complicating factors. It doesn't mean that you're not going to be eligible for TPS. We don't want to scare you, but it is really important to make sure that you prepare the best case you can and that you don't take any unnecessary risks. So if you do have one of those yellow card factors in your case, and absolutely, if one of those red card factors are present in your case, then you're going to want to talk to a qualified immigration attorney or accredited legal representative. In addition, you may have an asylum application pending, or you may qualify for asylum in some cases. And so learning about that and learning about whatever other immigration options may exist for you is going to be really critical, because TPS is temporary. It is important. It's going to provide much needed protection for Venezuelan nationals here in the United States, but it is temporary. And so examining all other options that might include a permanent pathway to legal status here in the United States is going to be important as well. Certainly, if you're in removal proceedings, getting some legal advice about how to proceed will be important too. I mentioned that you should ensure that your attorney is the right one for you and able to give you the advice that you need. And that is the same with non-attorneys. There are only very limited circumstances in which a non-attorney can help you with your immigration case. And that would be individuals who are working at recognized nonprofit organizations and who have received accreditation, a specific type of license from the Department of Justice to be able to provide immigration assistance. And there are rosters, lists of every single recognized organization like B1C and CIRI, Catholic Charities, and others here in the state of Connecticut, as well as every accredited legal representative. Getting the right help is really key because there are individuals who will use this time to take advantage of others who are really desperate to obtain immigration protection.
Yes, everything that Alicia said is terribly important. And these are the basic instructions to get the free consultations. Everybody who is listening here will get a link for a consultation slot. The ideal scenario is somebody who will complete the forms on his own and will meet with an attorney to ask questions, to make sure that everything is filled out correctly. The attorneys will not provide representation. So each individual will be responsible to mail out the application and the fee and the documents, and be responsible to attend the biometrics appointment. That means to have the fingerprints taken and everything else. Respond to a request for evidence and respond to any communication from USCIS. The consultations will be 30 minutes long and per person or per family unit, and it'll be Saturday, May 22nd between 10 and 4. And people will have to pre-register, preferably from Connecticut residents. That's because our organizations are located here. We want to favor the residents of Connecticut. And I think and interpreters will be provided if you need an interpreter.
So thank you, Adriana, and thank you to our three speakers for providing such critical information. We're going to answer some questions from the audience now. I saw many coming up. Remember that again, if you want to ask a question, it's in the Q&A feature, and I can see some trends of questions, and we have talked about it, but several questions are about the dual nationality. Some people from Portugal, Venezuela, Trinidad and Tobago, and Venezuela. Could any of you take that again? And I can't recall exactly who went over that at the beginning. I think it was you, Alicia.
I can answer, and it's going to be one of those typical lawyer answers, which is it depends. Having a dual nationality, whether it's Venezuela and Portugal, Venezuela and whatever other country, it does not automatically disqualify you for TPS, but it is a complicating factor. And so you may be required, and you would be wise to provide additional evidence showing that Venezuela, that your ties are most closely with the country of Venezuela. And so that's going to look different with each case. It's going to look different depending on where you've been living, what countries you have a passport from, which, as Adriana mentioned, which passport you use to enter the US, how you've identified yourself on previous applications and forms. All of those factors would have to be examined in deciding whether or not to apply and whether or not it's going to be a particularly difficult case to win. And so that's a decision. Those are the cases that you're absolutely going to want to be talking to an attorney or a legal representative so that you can examine your particular case, the evidence you have, weigh the risks and benefits, and then make the best decision on how to move forward. But you're not automatically disqualified just for having a dual nationality.
Thank you, Alicia. We have a couple of people asking about the EDE. There is one person that asked if we can amplify a little bit about that, but tied to that question, it's another, Bridget said that she was born in Venezuela, but her last residence was actually in Trinidad and Tobago. And she's asking if she can apply for EDE instead of TPS. Megan, would you like to, or Alicia, carry on?
That's okay. I can answer, or I can defer to Megan, or if she can supplement my response. But so the requirements for DED in terms of nationality are the same as with TPS. So you have to be a national of Venezuela or an individual without nationality, someone who is stateless, who last habitually resided in Venezuela. So a Venezuelan national with dual nationality may still be eligible for DED and may still be eligible for TPS. It's going to be one of those complicating factors if they had a dual nationality, dual citizenship, and were residing in a different country prior to the United States because of that firm resettlement issue that we discussed, but not automatically disqualified. DED is, again, it's similar to TPS. The period of time that it's granted is shorter. It only lasts, right now, as currently extended, would last only through July of next year. I can't remember the exact date. I think it's like July 20th or something of next year, 2022. And you had to have been here in the United States as of the extension date, which was January 20th of this year. So if you came to the United States as a Venezuelan national after that date in January, you would not currently be eligible for DED, though you may be eligible for TPS. As I mentioned before, in most circumstances, if you are eligible for TPS, that's the better deal. It is a longer form of protection since it will go for a longer period of time. But there may be some individuals who will only have DED if they only have DED as a possible protection, if they have one of those disqualifying factors, one of those grounds of inadmissibility present in their case. And whether or not that's present in your case is going to be a careful legal analysis. So one of those circumstances, again, where you're going to be discussing this with an attorney. DED, as I mentioned before, doesn't require prior registration. You cannot get a travel permit with DED, whereas that may be a possibility with TPS. There are similar criminal bars. But yeah, in general, TPS is the better option if you're eligible.
I want to add something, that if somebody already applied for employment authorization through DED, it would be convenient to apply for TPS without adding another employment authorization, but to have the TPS already approved would be helpful for any extension that will be granted when DED ends.
Thank you, Alicia and Adriana, for the clarification. Tied to that, there is someone asking, if I stayed in Colombia for a week before flying to the United States, is that firm resettlement? And you know, I'll pose a question, how about if it's for 1 month or 6 months of, you know, staying in Colombia or any other country before coming to the United States? Maybe Megan, would you like to take that one? Thank you.
Sure, I can take that one. So firm resettlement is legally defined as someone who entered into another country with or while in that country received an offer of permanent resident status, citizenship, or some other type of permanent resettlement. So if you left Venezuela and went to Colombia as a permanent resident or citizen of Colombia and only stayed there for a week, you would be considered most likely firmly resettled because you had permanent status there. You had something that allowed you to stay there indefinitely and permanently for as long as you chose. If the same would apply if you went for a month or for a year. However, if you only went to Colombia en route to coming to the US, or perhaps vacation or a business trip, and you only had visitor status or some other non-temporary or non-permanent status, some sort of temporary status, that would not be seen as permanent resettlement or firm resettlement. Now, it does get tricky the longer you stay in a certain country. If you were there for a year, there might start to be some questions about how you could legally be there for a year without having been firmly resettled. If you were there for 5 years, the questions would probably be a little harsher on you. How could you be there for 5 years and not be firmly resettled? Some things that I've had immigration judges look at is whether you actually apply for a visa to another country from that country. So I had a judge determine that my client had been firmly resettled in Brazil because the Mexican consulate in Brazil was willing to give him a visitor visa to Mexico, even though he was Ghanaian and was just living in Brazil for a few years. That was something that the immigration judge looked at and used to determine firm resettlement. So there are factors that can be considered that might not apply in all cases, but generally speaking, firm resettlement would require that permanent or some other form of permanent settlement, whether it's permanent resident, citizenship, something that allows you to settle in that country indefinitely.
Thank you, Megan. I have 2 questions that, although they are not related, I think I can kind of throw them at the same time. One is asking, once you have the TPS, someone is asking, can you clarify what is it about the travel permit? And also, once you have the TPS, can I actually get a green card after getting the TPS?
Okay, do you want me to take that? Well, yes, you can apply for travel authorization, which is called advance parole. You have to complete a form, which is the I-131, and pay a fee and submit photos and submit a reason why you want to travel. And you will get that travel authorization that is for a limited time. You have to travel within the times that is allowed, that you get it for, not before nor after. So that's doable. And the other one, green card, no, it does not need. We said from the beginning, TPS is temporary. It's a temporary measure that does not prevent you from exploring other options.
Thank you, Adriana. We have someone here that applied for asylum about 3 years ago, and they did their fingerprints. And is asking that with the TPS, if they need to do the fingerprints again.
That's going to be immigration's decision. It is very likely that it's not very likely, it is possible that USCIS will, instead of making a new fingerprint appointment, rerun the previous fingerprints, since fingerprints don't change. But sometimes immigration will give you a new appointment because they feel like it, because of the month it is, because the last prints weren't as clear as they wanted them to be. So there is no way to know or control whether or not they're going to issue you a new fingerprint appointment. You just have to wait and see. You'll get notification either way, either a letter with a date and time for your biometrics to be taken, or a letter confirming that they will rerun the previous information and that it won't be necessary for you to appear at another appointment.
Thank you, Alicia. And I have another question about someone who said that received his notification about the payment, and himself and the other member of the families, and in asking how long does it take to receive the status or an understanding to know if he was approved or not. So do we have a sense of how long since the moment that the person pays until you're notified? Do we know how long it's taking these days?
We don't know for sure because this is relatively new. We haven't had a new designation for TPS in quite some time, and we're also still in a global pandemic. It is, and they haven't even posted processing times at USCIS website yet for Venezuelan TPS. I just checked before the presentation today to confirm that. But it's likely that it will take at least 4 to 6 months before you have an approval or a work permit on the basis of an approved TPS. And it is quite possible that it will take longer than that. How much longer, we really don't know. Hopefully soon, as more cases are filed and processing times are released, we'll have a better sense of when to expect most cases to have been adjudicated. But as of right now, we don't know. At least 4 to 6 months, and could be longer.
Thank you, Alicia. Someone is asking that, is there any problem if I apply only for the TPS first and then apply for the work permit later?
Well,
There's no
that's
problem.
it. Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
There's no problem with doing that, but as Alicia mentioned, it can take quite some time for USCIS to process these applications. So if you are considering work authorization at some point in the future, then I think it would be advisable to apply for it now so that you get it when you need it, rather than need it and then not have it for several months. Obviously, there is a financial component to the application, so I certainly understand if that is not something you can do at the present moment. And that's something you'd have to consider as well when you decide when is best for you to apply.
Thank you, Megan. And I think I'm going to ask one last question, and the rest potentially we will answer later. But someone asked, do I have to list every country other than Venezuela and the US that I have ever been in, or only the countries that I traveled through on my last trip to get to the United States?
Well, what immigration will be looking at is whether the person is truly a Venezuelan or was firmly resettled into another country. So it's not any country that was visited as a tourist, but every country that they lived or they had a right to live. They were residents or dual nationals. Those are the ones that immigration will be looking at.
Thank you, Adriana. I'll ask one very last question to see if we can go quickly. But I think we answered this one before. What happens in the case you're not protected by the DED because you enter US after January 20th, but enter before March 8th, and you were only admitted for 6 months while you wait for the TPS application response? Do you want to take that, Elise?
Sure. So I think that the question is aimed at like what the status of the individual will be while they're waiting for TPS approval, given that it's likely their tourist visa, their tourist status will have expired by the time a decision is made, since the processing times will likely extend more than 6 months. Individuals who have an application for temporary protected status pending would likely be considered in a period of authorized stay. So you wouldn't have a specific lawful status here, but are permitted to stay and wait for a decision to be made. If you were for some reason put into removal proceedings while your case was pending, like if, for example, you traveled too close to the Canadian border or too close to the southern border, as has happened with folks before, and come across an ICE checkpoint and they determined that you were out of status and put you into removal proceedings, it is very likely that having an application for TPS pending, a bona fide application for TPS pending, would allow you to sort of buy time with the immigration judge while USCIS makes a decision on your eligibility for protection or not.
Thank you, Alicia, and thank you to the three of you for answering all these many questions. We're coming to an end now. This has been a very engaging evening, as it always is with the three of you. We know that the path forward won't be necessarily easy. For 4 years in the previous administration, we lived under an anti-immigration agenda, and there is much to be undone. There is, without a doubt, a great need for progress through lasting reforms. And speaking for B1C, we're ready to meet this moment. We celebrate and join the new administration in making our vision of a fair and welcoming immigration system finally a reality. I am also incredibly grateful to count with partners like our speakers tonight and the attorneys that will be offering consultations on May 22nd, as Adriana was mentioning before. We share a common vision of one welcoming community in which all immigrants are thriving and contributing members. A link to register for optional free consultations will be sent to all registrants that attended this webinar tonight, along with a copy of the presentation.